Welcome to CriolloWise Podcast, the evolution of Criollo breed around the world.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into the world of Criollo horse taming.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. It's based on some stuff you sent over the CriolloWise podcast and articles.
Okay.
Seems like you're pretty interested in this whole human-animal bond thing with these powerful horses.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how horse taming is so deeply connected to human civilization, Think about it. 9,000 years ago, that's when we started domesticating horses.
Wow.
And not just for riding, but for food shelter protection.
Oh, wow.
And that's how empires rose, conquests happened, and even warfare totally changed.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about how much horses have impacted our history.
Yeah.
And speaking of history, the stuff you sent focuses on two main styles of taming.
Yeah.
Traditional and rational.
Right.
And they seem pretty different from what I've read so far.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a big contrast.
Yeah.
So let's start with traditional taming.
Okay.
It's all about dominance and control, super old school. Picture this. You're in Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina. You see a young Criollo, 2 or 3 years old, lassoed and brought down to the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, and sometimes they even twist their ears and limbs, to make them submit.
That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
I was listening to the CriolloWise podcast, and they mentioned they even use halters to restrain the horse.
Oh, yeah.
And force them to accept saddles, getting them ready to be ridden no matter what.
Yeah, basically.
They also talked about how a lot of horses resist and get super scared and stressed and even hurt themselves trying to get free.
Yeah, you've hit a key point there. Traditional taming doesn't really care about the horse's instincts or feelings.
Yeah.
And that can lead to this thing called learned helplessness.
What's that?
So basically, when an animal goes through a ton of bad stuff over and over, they kind of give up.
Oh,
they become passive and don't even try to resist the abuse anymore.
That's so sad. I can't even imagine a horse getting to that point.
Yeah.
And the sources you shared said this kind of training can have long-term effects on their well-being.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the financial hit for the owners,
Right.
A horse that's always hurt or fighting back wouldn't be very useful.
Exactly. Traditional taming, while it has cultural importance, can lead to learned helplessness.
Right.
It messes with the horse's well-being and how they perform long-term.
Yeah.
But this leads us to a really cool shift in the equestrian world. Rational taming.
Okay.
It started getting popular in the 1980s, and it's been growing ever since.
Interesting. So instead of all that force and dominance, it's about building a partnership with the horse.
Exactly.
It's about respecting their natural behavior, understanding them, and communicating with them in a way that makes sense to them.
It's about working with them, not against them.
I like that.
So imagine this. You have a step-by-step process, starting with getting them used to things through brushing.
Okay.
You slowly introduce the saddle and bridle, and you spend a lot of time training them on the ground before even thinking about riding.
That's so different from those traditional methods.
Right.
Yeah, the CriolloWise podcast talk about some specific rational taming techniques.
Oh, yeah.
Like Indian training, they focus on building a bond through groundwork and trust before riding.
Interesting.
And then there's training on foot, where the horse gets used to the weight and presence of a rider.
Oh, that makes sense.
And imprinting, too. They start handling the foal gently right when it's born.
Right, from the beginning.
Yeah, it's all about building trust and confidence early on.
It's fascinating how much emphasis they put on positive interaction,
Yeah, definitely a different approach.
Yeah. Oh, and of course there's Join Up, made famous by Monty Roberts.
Yeah?
You know the guy who impressed Queen Elizabeth II with his horse training skills?
Yeah, I remember reading about that. It's amazing how he could connect with and train horses so quickly.
Right.
Just by understanding their psychology and how they communicate.
It's a whole different world from those traditional methods.
Yeah.
Where they force the horse to submit.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that rational taming is all about reading the horse's body language.
Right.
Understanding their emotions and using communication and positive reinforcement to build a partnership.
Exactly.
It's not about forcing them into anything.
Right.
So the success of trainers like Monty Roberts, who choose understanding over force, really makes you think about how we treat horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on all of this? What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, for me, it's realizing that the way you tame a horse really affects their well-being.
Absolutely.
We talked about the fear, the stress, the potential for injuries with traditional taming.
Right.
But it goes even deeper than that. Like, constantly forcing a horse and dominating them can break their spirit.
Yeah.
It can really damage their willingness to trust and connect with humans.
That's a really important point. It's like any healthy relationship,
Yeah.
respect and understanding lead to cooperation,
Right.
while fear and intimidation just create resentment and resistance.
Exactly. And when we approach horses with respect and understanding,
Yeah.
and we take the time to learn their language and build a real partnership,
Right.
the results can be amazing. You see horses that are confident and curious and eager to learn and work with their humans.
Yeah, it's like they can finally be themselves without being held back by fear or resentment.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what are the ethical implications of these different approaches?
That's a great question. The way we treat animals shows our own values and how we see ourselves in the world.
Yeah.
If we think we have the right to dominate and control other living beings,
Yeah.
that might be how we approach horse taming.
Whereas if we see animals as beings who deserve respect and compassion,
Yeah.
our training methods will show that.
Exactly. And it's important to remember this isn't just about horses.
Right.
These principles apply to all animals and even to how we treat other people.
It's all connected. As
Yeah.
our listener thinks about all of this, what would you say is the most important thing to take away from this deep dive?
I'd say it's the power of understanding. When we really make an effort to understand another being, whether it's a horse, a dog, or another person,
Right.
we open up the possibility for a deeper, more meaningful connection.
I like that.
That's where the real magic happens, as we're wrapping up our exploration of Criollo horse taming.
Yeah.
There's one more thought I want to leave our listener with.
Okay.
We've talked about traditional versus rational methods,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's often a mix of both.
That's true. It's not always so black and white.
Right.
Some trainers might use parts of both styles.
Yeah.
Like maybe they use traditional techniques, but in a gentler way.
Right.
Or they start with a more traditional approach and then switch to a rational style as the horse learns.
Exactly. And even within rational taming, there are different techniques and philosophies.
Mhm.
So it's not about picking a side, but about understanding the nuances,
Yeah.
the different tools that are out there, and finding what works best for both the horse and the trainer.
I agree. The goal is to create a harmonious partnership with the horse, one that's built on mutual respect, understanding, and trust.
Exactly.
I think this deep dive has shown us how much we can learn from horses.
Absolutely.
It teaches patience, communication, and the importance of building trust and connection.
Yeah.
They really do. And they remind us that true power isn't about dominating, but about understanding
Right.
and empathy.
Right.
Speaking of exploring further, the CriolloWise podcast mentioned a couple of techniques
Yes.
that we haven't really talked about.
Okay.
One was mouthpiece taming,
Right.
or sometimes they call it chin breaking.
Yeah.
Used in traditional taming, and it honestly sounds kind of rough.
Yeah, even the names themselves showed that focus on control and making the horse submit.
Yeah.
They basically manipulate the horse's head and mouth, sometimes really forcefully, to show they're in charge.
It makes you think, like, how did those techniques even come about, and why did people use them for so long?
Well, if you think about the historical context we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
horses were seen as tools or even weapons.
Right.
They were used for war, transportation, and farming. Yeah,
So it was all about controlling their every move.
that makes sense. But as we've learned more about animal behavior, our training methods have changed too.
Right.
The CriolloWise podcast also mentioned natural horsemanship
Yeah.
as a philosophy that influences rational taming. What exactly does that mean?
So natural horsemanship is a pretty broad term,
Okay.
but it's basically about working with the horse's instincts and natural behaviors
Okay.
instead of trying to force them to do things that aren't natural for them.
Right.
It's about building a relationship based on communication, trust, and leadership,
Okay.
not dominance.
So it's more about guiding the horse, not forcing them.
Exactly. And that can be really effective.
Okay.
When a horse feels understood and respected, they're much more likely to cooperate
Right.
and willingly follow their human partner.
It seems like this shift towards more ethical and empathetic training methods
Yeah.
is part of a bigger change in how we see animals in general, don't you think?
I think you're right. As we learn more about animal intelligence and emotions.
Yeah. It's getting harder to justify using force or cruelty.
Right.
We're starting to realize that animals are sentient beings.
Yeah.
They can feel a whole range of emotions just like us.
And that realization is leading to more compassion and respect in how we interact with the animal world.
It's a positive trend, and it's not just happening with horse training.
Yeah.
We're seeing it everywhere, from laws protecting animals to how we raise animals for food.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected.
Absolutely.
The choices we make affect not just us, but all the living things around us.
That's a powerful thought to keep in mind.
Yeah.
As you continue learning about Criollo horses and horse taming, I encourage you to keep thinking about these things. Let your curiosity guide you, and always remember the importance of empathy and understanding.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the amazing world of Criollo horse taming.
Right.
It's been a journey full of insights and thought-provoking questions. Until next time, happy trails.